Hello, everyone, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by D&I Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. It is the first Thursday of 2021. Yay! It's 7 p.m. GMT. We're live on twitch.tv/DNI Stream. I'm Josey Howarth, and as always, I am joined by my true penny, straight-fingered, omnipotently OP co-host, Chris Seabach. Now, I have to make note of this. The omnipotently OP was in the script.
I didn't write the script.
I, however,
it was one of the Christmas
true penny
elves.
One of the Christmas. But you know what? It doesn't make a difference. It was in the script, but I added the true penny and straight fingered.
I don't think I'm familiar necessarily with the term true penny. I think I've heard it, but I don't know what it means.
A true penny and straight fingered individual is someone who you can absolutely guarantee will be blunt and honest with you.
Oh, okay.
And it is full of great respect because they are a true penny, not a fake penny, and they are straight fingered, not crooked fingered.
Okay, right. Well, I agree with that. Thank you.
Oh, of course you do. You're omnipotent.
I am. Well,
omnipotently OP.
I mean, the elves agree, but I'm not sure I do. So yeah. So thank you very much, Josey. Much appreciated. And it's always nice to have a good introduction. And it's always nice to have people in chat as well. A big hello to everybody. Please do get involved with the show, as you all know. It is live, and we do take questions, answers, and we will respond and put your bits up on screen if things come up. And I haven't got the little thing that does that up. I just remembered this is the first one of 2020 and 2021, and I haven't there's a slight technical issue.
Welcome to D&I Stream. We're definitely the software repository knowledge-y people who do the things. But anyway, before we begin, like always, we're going to have an icebreaker. It's a question we ask, and please feel free to respond in chat or send us messages on Twitter in the future when you listen to this on Spotify or wherever it is you happen to listen to our show. But this is usually a question to get to know us better, and of course, to keep ourselves from talking about the topic too soon. So, Chris, it's a simple one. What's one of your favorite gifts this Christmas?
PS5, because I'm 6 years old. No.
I'm not surprised.
One of my favorite gifts this Christmas, honestly, I got a PS5. My wife bought me one. She tried desperately to keep it secret, but she didn't succeed at all. I didn't know it was there, but I knew. She's just really bad. She's got a really bad poker face, you know. And she dropped hints like months before. She was like, "Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get your big present for the Christmas because it's it's hard to get hold of and it's in." And I'm like, "Well, there's nothing else that I'm going to want, is there? That's hard to get hold of." And if anyway, she did really well at the same time. I didn't know for definite, but it's a good present. Anyway, my favorite present this Christmas, in fact, is a present I gave to my wife. Just before Christmas, we lost our cat, our big meow cat, and I spent about 3 days creating like not a montage, like a homage to him. And it was, I made a little model of him, and I made it out of dry clay, put him on a little fence and put him in a frame, put some photos there and put his name in, etc. And she loved it. And she cried before she even opened it because of what I wrote on the front of it. So I got what I wanted. I wanted her to cry. But yes,
you wanted your wife to cry for Christmas.
I did. It was a good cry, though.
I have to say, like a decade ago, like when Kindles were a thing, etc. My husband got me a Kindle for Christmas, and I literally cried. And he bragged to everybody that he made his wife cry.
Crying for Christmas is the best.
He just says,
That's right. That's right.
For me, I added skulls.
Yay!
To my collection. So, and it's fantastic because I have a green screen and there's actually green on this, but you can kind of see how it's all,
Very nice.
For those of you who are listening to us in the future, you'll just have to go to YouTube in order to see these amazing skulls that green screen out to present really awkward looking faces. That's creepy.
Are they bright green, the bits that we can't see then?
Yeah, they are. They're basically the green kind of that you see above my head in the actual code. So Yeah, I was about to say in the code on the screen, there's sort of that colored green, which is fascinating. But I got a whole bunch of those, and yeah, that made my day. I also got a Cthulhu eating a skull mug, so my sense of humor has absolutely been catered to.
I
More debugging skulls, yes.
I got way too much chocolate as well, and I've put in a ridiculous amount, and not just normal Christmas eating, but I've put in a ridiculous amount of weight on as well, and I'm desperately trying to lose it now because I'm not fitting into my clothes, and I'm struggling. My knees are not saying nice things to me when I go for a run and a walk and things like that. I need to. Been a bad one this year, bad one. Anyway, should we move on to the show then?
Yes. Yes, we actually have a show to talk about. We have a topic.
We do. So today's show is entitled The Forever Game. We're going to be looking at software, well, bespoke software maintenance, really, because there's lots of different ways we could look at software maintenance. But because, you know, we are software developers, we do provide software services to our clients. We have to maintain that software in lots of different ways. So let's start by discussing what maintenance in terms of bespoke software is. So let's start with a question, Josey. Can you give us some context? And can you tell us what you think about when having to maintain the software element that you provide to your customers? Because you don't just do software, you also worry about the hardware and the security side of things. We're talking about specifically maintenance of software.
Yeah, in this particular case, I have to look at it from multiple perspectives. One, I have to look at functionality. Is what is being provided functionally performing for the end user? Is it performing the task that has been asked of it? Whether it's allowing someone to log in or storing information in a database or whatever. So the functionality is what I have to maintain. I also have to maintain the security of things, obviously. And then I have to maintain the platforms themselves. So when it comes to what I think about it, I kind of try to go with a KISS principle, which is the keep it simple, stupid. I try to not push too fast into the latest, greatest technologies or the bleeding edge. That's not my company, as the case may be. I'm not here to take you to the edge. I'm here to make certain that you don't have to fall off the edge. So I try to find ways of maintaining that are very easy, very simple, and capable of being error checked.
When it comes to that edge, you know, being sitting on that cusp, sitting at the cutting edge, I have a similar. So Josey and I, for those who are listening new, have slightly different ways of delivering software to our clients. I write bespoke software. I write stuff from scratch using frameworks and tools and software development languages, software development tools, all kinds of things. Josey does as well, but you provide more package-based stuff like WordPress sites and that kind of thing. So
all the good stuff that goes with it.
You have usually there's a prescribed way to maintain and update your software, but it still is quite intricate.
It is, and I think one of the more complicated sides of things is when you start doing anything, like even within, say, the Drupal and the WordPress communities or like any CMS out there, you have your core, and that is whatever that platform happens to be. That core is going to do its own thing. It's going to update under its own development life cycle. It's going to have its own priorities. A perfect example is this latest greatest thing with Gutenberg coming out in the WordPress community and it basically blowing up to the fact that one of the most downloaded plugins for WordPress was disabling it.
Disabling WordPress or?
No, disabling Gutenberg.
What's Gutenberg? Sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, Gutenberg is they've taken, I don't know, have you ever actually used WordPress?
Yeah, I mean, I know the rough concept.
So in the back end where you fill in the post or the page, you would fill it in and then, obviously you can do your styling on the side. They built in a visual editor into the back end because I think they're trying to compete with visual theming or something. Like, I don't exactly know what their thinking was for it, but the blocks and Gutenberg is all about that sort of visual style. And you can just press a button and all of a sudden a header is present, or press a button and a paragraph or an image is present, or what have you.
WYSIWYG's like site builder.
It's literally a visual builder. It's a
Yeah.
site builder. Yeah, it's a WYSIWYG. But anyway, this whole thing gets introduced, and there was a huge uproar because it was not accessible. There were accessibility issues, and there were a couple of other issues that came with it. And it ended up being the kind of thing where I have some clients who are like, hey, this is really cool. And I have other clients who are like, if I see that on my site, I am deleting it. So for me, I have to, that's just the core platform itself.
Yeah.
So I have to compensate for whatever the core platform is. And then on top of that, any extra code that's been written to make the site functionally work the way the client has intended. So for example, turning it into, I love using this with you, a guinea pig's website. Yay. So, having the custom post types and things like that, those things have to be maintained as well, especially if you're using PHP versions and they're upgrading.
So those packages or those additional features or those customizations have to be updated in line with the core platform and the plugin updates, which are two distinctly separate things. Now, generally, how long, let's say, for example, how long do you leave it until you maintain or run a maintenance cycle or perform some maintenance on one of your clients' websites? Generally, what's the time scale?
Daily.
Is it daily? So every one of your
daily.
clients, you look at their sites every day and click some buttons and do some upgrades and do some updates, etc.
Well, it's a little, I have a platform, this goes back to the whole keeping it simple, stupid. I have a platform that monitors. And if I happen to see that there is a security alert for a plugin, which happens insanely frequently.
Oh, yes.
With the WordPress community. I think it was just released that like 36% of the websites on the web are WordPress based. And Drupal has its own issues and things that go with it. But the fact that it is so prolific and so out there, it's a viable target. I mean,
oh yeah, definitely.
It's just a thing. So I have to pay attention to when the security things and alerts are happening. And if they're happening, my clients are very aware of this. I will force an upgrade on your site for security, period. I do not care if it breaks your site. I do not care if it does something that makes me have to go in and do an extra 2 hours worth of work.
I was going to say, so how often does that happen? And when you do that, do you run the update and then react to it, or do you do like a test update somewhere? And
it depends entirely upon what the vector of attack is, to be perfectly blunt. Because if the vector of attack is just simply it's a cross-site scripting thing that has been found in something that has been in WordPress for years, but someone just happened to find a 0-day thing, yeah, that gets updated and I'll react to it later, because that is a easily accessible vector of attack. If instead the vector of attack is the user has to be logged in, then I'm not going to panic as much, because my clients don't allow user registration for some of their sites.
Yeah.
The ones that do, I would worry about. So it's being very aware of exactly what each client needs, what's happening, and what the alerts are. Because unfortunately, we live in a day and age where if you have anything online, it is a vector for attack. So I because of that, I do run checks on a daily basis. I also have checks that are running hourly. And yes, I do get that notification in the middle of the night that kind of says, you might need to get up and see what the heck is going on. I do have those on occasion. Not frequently, mind you, because of how I have the platform set up, but they do happen, which is why I'm looking at going more static. But that's the upgrade process. It's the name of the show. It's the forever game. You stop, there's a problem. You become vulnerable. You become outdated even. Functionality can be lost. This is one of the big ones I've got right now. I have a client who's about to lose functionality because we actually need to put time in and modify something that they got from someone else that was written for an older version of PHP that will no longer be supported, which is important.
Yes. So my problems are much different from yours.
Yes, they are.
But the software products that I produce, sometimes they are public, and the security usually isn't my problem, if you know what I mean. But making sure that we're on the latest version of things, I don't mean that it's not my problem and I don't care about it, because I design securely first. Everything I do,
Yes,
I
you
want
do.
to be on the latest patches. I want to be on the latest package versions. I want to be on the latest framework. At least security patches, anyway, from a security point of view. But when it comes to actually maintaining the software, there's a few things that come to mind. One is technical debt and being able to manage that technical debt. So technical debt is something like, I'll get to it later. I'll make sure, I'll hack it together now. I'll fix it so it works. And then we'll deal with the wider problem, which, let's
And
say,
then you
for
forget.
example, not necessarily. It depends on the kind of maintenance cycle you have in place and the mindset you have as well. I work with some clients that couldn't care less about technical debt, and they're constantly chasing it, and they're constantly chasing their own tail to try and fix things up and get things working. I've got other clients that I work with that I might, bearing in mind that when I deliver my own stuff, I deliver things with technical debt in mind, and I will cater for that in my estimates that I give them, and I say, right, this is going to take me 4 days, and they're right, well, that's not that complex. What have you considered this, and this? No, I haven't. And then a lot of the time, clients will be like, that doesn't matter to me. I don't care that you haven't got the latest patch on that packet, on that NuGet package or that NPM package or things like that. But it depends on where the site is being
go
hosted.
composer.
But the problem we've got, the main difference that you and I have, Josey, is that most of my applications that I write are dark web. Not dark web, that's the wrong one. Deep web, sorry. They are deep web applications, which is
I was going to say,
basically
Chris,
anything
have
that's
you done something that I didn't know about?
anything that's hidden behind a login screen. Basically, that's a deep web application.
Right. Yeah.
Or they are completely closed in a secure environment where patches don't matter so much because they're behind firewalls, because the computers that they're running on, if it's a desktop application or even if it's a website that is just being accessed on an intranet internally, or something that's been hosted in a closed cloud environment, that, or some kind of subnet of a virtual network in the cloud or something. Most of the time, the environments that my applications get pushed to are in those environments. So patching and zero-day security fixes aren't usually a major issue. As soon as you publish something to the web and it is available on a public website, whether it's behind a login or not, that's when security updates become a much more serious matter. So where I approach this from in terms of software...
I agree with that.
Go on.
To a point.
Okay, all right. So
I was going to say, even
I think we've got a delay.
Yeah, I think we do have a delay. Just so in case people are unaware, just because people probably aren't, my motherboard is dying. And what this produces is a lag effect. And it's been building for the past, I'd say 3 or 4 months. I'll have a new PC in like 3 weeks' time, because graphics cards, try getting a hold of one. I dare you, like a good one. But so we're going to have some weird sound delay issues, and we apologize in advance for that. But there's a whole concept that we could go into about when security needs to be handled or how it needs to be handled, etc., which I'm not going to get into, because I'll sidetrack us entirely into a security talk. Let's not do that. Let's stick with the concept of what you were saying, though.
So I tend to stick, when I'm talking about software maintenance, I'm talking about the management of technical debt in general, because that is definitely part of the maintenance life cycle. Because there may be jobs that you do. You may, I'll write this service, or I'll write this class or this piece of code. I'll use a third-party library. For example, today I wrote a library that creates thumbnails out of PNG images, GIF images, JPEG images, and AVIs and MP4s. It's just a library that does all of that kind of thing. And I thought, right, why rewrite the book? There's probably a million packages out there that already do this in the C# world. Let's have a look. There were. So I chose one and I went with it. It seems to be quite popular. It's still well supported. But if that package ever doesn't become supported and stops getting updates, and all the company decide they don't want to focus on security, or security becomes a big thing, or maybe it breaks for some reason because the .NET framework has moved on and they haven't moved on, then you have to change that. So what we have to do is we have to design design around that. The way that we design our software really feeds into it. However, I'm getting to a point here, by the way. The reason that that's important is if we don't design an adapter around it or some kind of abstraction around this particular call, we would have that code and that library everywhere would depend on it. Everywhere that needs to do a thumbnail change would depend on this library. But if we wrap it and we abstract it, then we can deal with that abstraction in a much easier way in the future. And that's just one of the benefits of abstraction. But that's a key thing for software maintenance for me, that I can make a decision now to very quickly write an abstraction around something. And then I can, in the future, make the actual, I can have a discussion with somebody like an architect or a client and say, right, I've used this library now. If you don't want to use this one, fine, I'll strip it out and replace it. But everything that we've linked it into and all of the work that we've done that needs to create thumbnails in the various different places, it's all, it's already linked in. We don't have to don't have to change that. We've got the signatures in place for the code, etc. So that to me is a key part, being able to design around it and deal with the technical debt in the future.
See, that's the same thing within what I do. It makes no difference where I'm doing it. All it takes is, I tend to look at it from the perspective of the functionality, because what it comes down to is you have a functionality. You're making thumbnails. That is the basic function of what you're doing. One of the things that I think I love about software is the fact that you can do that in a variety of different ways. And you can have that communication between the different tools that do it and what is actually the end result, as long as you have, like you said, the wrapper present. The same thing happens within what I do too. I think one of the more difficult things that people tend to forget, especially if they're not in our industry, which is why I think, they hire people like us, Chris, is that stuff does update. A package can, we've seen repositories get updated with code and had to figure out, well, the API is changing for this place. We need to do this. And we have to completely change how we're making these calls because of this particular thing. Like, we see that all the time, but our clients don't. And trying to explain to them, just because I'm handing this over to you doesn't mean that you are done for life, doesn't always work.
There's that adage that I've repeated multiple times on this show, and I repeat to my clients on a regular basis, that software is never finished, only abandoned. That should be on my tombstone. That
I should just get you I'll get you a mug for Christmas.
Get me
next
a t-shirt
year.
with it on,
or for your birthday.
Yeah, maybe.
But see, that's the absolute truth. And when we were discussing the life cycle of software in general, and we were talking about agile development and Scrum and everything else that goes with it. I mean, one of the core things that sticks in my mind is the acknowledgement that features and bugs will always be needed. Well, features will always be needed, bugs will always be present. I mean, nothing is perfect.
Apart from my code, there's no bugs in my code.
Well, Chris, everybody knows that you're omnipotent and omnipresent. Sure. Well, let's start giving you names.
Omnicris.
Omnicris. Wow. Now you're making me think of Mass Effect. But, like, for example, PHP Storm. It is used to help debug PHP. It is used to help in the development process. That itself gets updates. Every tool that we use can update, which could change drastically how we do things.
Visual Studio Code updating every 10 seconds, pretty much.
Visual Studio Code. Okay. I love VS Code. Don't get me wrong. I have a friend who actually has their name in the contributions for fixing and adding features and things like that. But my gosh, that thing needs to stop with its updates.
It is. The cadence
every
is
single
ridiculous.
time I open it.
Its cadence is quicker than my running cadence, put it that way. It's ridiculous. Or I'm very slow, one of the two. So on top of writing abstractions and dealing with technical debt, we have the actual upgrades of packages as well. Now, there's also, we can bring into this as well something or we can consider the packages that we use, that we need to upgrade, that we need to maintain for security reasons or for feature reasons. Hopefully, when we select them, if it's an open source one in particular, or even, to be fair, even in the commercial world, there's a few companies that don't adhere to this strictly. If they use version management properly and they use something like Semver to release the packages, we can make very quick decisions on this release, this particular package, which is we're on version 3.2, let's say, of the package. 3.2.1 comes out. That should just be a bug fix or a patch. It shouldn't be breaking change. Great, get it in there. 3.3 comes out, and we have to look at it and go, probably just new features. If they're following Semver properly, this is just going to be new features. Nothing will be broken. There's no breaking changes. So let's get that one in as well. Test it a bit more thoroughly, but generally just get that in there as well. But when it comes to version 4 of the software, then we would expect things to be broken. We would expect the integration that we've done to have a little bit more effort. So those kind of upgrades probably need to be considered a little bit more. That kind of maintenance. But it's not always the it's not always the case, unfortunately.
No, it isn't. Especially, how many times have you gone and you've read the patch notes for a particular tool or package that you were using, and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah. And you go and you update, and then you find a hidden fix that they didn't list, and it has absolutely screwed you over. Have you ever had that happen?
Most of the time I don't read the patch notes. Most of the time I just look at the version numbers and go, that's all right, get it in. That's not all right. Or I am quite seriously...
I've had to chase stuff like that before.
I am a lot of my clients' worst nightmare, because I will just go into a code base, because I know if I'm using Git, a proper software control tool, or even if I'm using SVN, anything like that, if I'm using a software control tool, software source control tool, then I can revert back to what I was at. So let's just quickly spike it and see what the upgrade does. If we've got a suite of tests, brilliant. Run the tests and see if everything works. Make sure you run it manually as well, and make sure it works as well, with a manual test, a quick manual test. And if it doesn't look like anything's majorly broken, and the feature that you've updated or the package you've updated, you've tested the features that use it, go for it. It's done. That's an upgrade. If it breaks significantly, spend a little bit of time looking at it, but time box that spike and make sure that you've not see how much work you think it would be to actually upgrade it. Feed that back into the team, feed that back into the backlog or whatever you're working on, and do it when it can be done. But otherwise, I wouldn't just upgrade arbitrarily and expect to... I'm not a reactive person. I am usually proactive. And when I get quite angry when I have to be reactive, because it's usually not my fault. Somebody else has done something that's broken something that I'm like, right, I can fix this and I will fix this, but I'm going to have to stay up until 6 a.m. to fix it, And I'm not saying I haven't done it myself before, because I have. Yes. I have broken my own things before. But usually I'm in a situation where I can control that release cadence and that, maintenance cycle.
That's kind of the purpose for why you have things like, dev, test, stage, UX or UI or usability, and then production. You have that sort of pathing that you can walk through to make certain that everything works. But, when it comes down to it, packages aren't the only thing we have to keep an eye on.
They're not. And you mentioned earlier on, when we were talking about WordPress, the core. Upgrading the core of what you're working on, I would consider that something like a framework upgrade. So let's say, for example, I'm working in .NET.
That's technically all it is really just a framework upgrade.
Or PHP. You're working in something that is a version. So .NET 3.1, I think it was 3.1 was the last one, but 5 got recently released. 5 jumps from 3.1 to 5. Don't ask why. I'm not going to try and explain it. The 5 is basically the latest version, and it comes with tons of new features that make code maintenance and add lots of new language features into the framework. They're tied to the language. It's not quite the same as the framework, but let's just, for the argument's sake, say that .NET 5 is the new language, right? So .NET 5 comes out. It's got all these new features. You can do all these new cool things, and some developers are like, oh yeah, cool, new toys. Let's get them in there. But I look at them and I go, I have to be pragmatic about what the upgrade of this piece of software is going to take X amount of time, based on the fact that we want to upgrade the framework. Usually, it's not that much effort to upgrade .NET, but sometimes it is. Like, for example, the work that I've been doing for a client for the last couple of years. I'm in the second year now, pretty much, and that upgrade, they hired me specifically to manage that upgrade and to upgrade all of the packages and to also create packages and change. I mean, we're still doing it, and we're still going to be doing it for quite a while yet. There's a lot involved in it because it's a massive legacy piece of software, but there's also lots of re-architecture to do as well. So there's a hell of a lot of things going on. But specifically, there was an upgrade of the framework as well, a core framework upgrade that we needed to do. There's lots of things in their code base that aren't in the new version of the framework. They've been deprecated. So we have to. They've put it off for years, upgrading to this later version. They've finally made that decision, and they've invested in it, and they've catered for it in terms of their timescales and deliverables to their clients. It's a commercial decision we have to make at that point. So you have to weigh up what are the benefits of the new upgrade and how long is it going to take me. It turns out that 3.1 to 5 in .NET World is actually quite an easy upgrade most of the time. There's still some caveats there, of course, but the benefits you get from moving to 5 greatly outweigh the amount of time the effort you would have to put into it, because there's new language features that make our lives easier and the code more terse.
See, I think when it comes to the stuff that I do, in the world of PHP 8 is on the market. Yeah, came out November 20th, 2020. It's a fantastic day. But anyway, we have that. And do you have clients, Chris, that are just aware enough to be dangerous?
Oh, yes. I have clients that are extremely aware. I have clients that have individual members of staff in senior positions that are more aware, or they think they're more aware than they are. And they make wide sweeping decisions without really fully understanding what decisions they're making. For example, one of my clients have recently made a decision to move their desktop applications into the web world without fully understanding the massive change that they have to make, because they have so much reliance on this code base that is desktop focused. And they think that opening a browser up, a browser would have, like, for example, let's talk about these thumbnails we're talking about here.
Oh, just wrap it in Electra. It'll be fine.
Well, no, unfortunately, because it's not a typical JavaScript application either. Unfortunately, it is a web. I'm not getting into it, right? But I'm trying to keep away from specifics here, Josey.
I've actually heard that before. But anyway, so sorry. It's just one of those things that I've heard recently that just made my brain go, just stop. But anyway.
I mean, I actually really want to play with Electron and figure out how it works, but I think there's probably more to it in the enterprise than the people get excited about it. Let on. Yeah. But anyway,
I just look at it like a Chromium without tabs. But anyway,
you make this wide sweeping decision that you want to move to the web from a desktop world and a history of a desktop applications, etc. And you make it, and then there's all these design decisions that you've made in terms of architecture and stuff, and it's like you've made assumptions there that you can do the same thing in the web world that you can do on the desktop world. When you're native, as we all know, you have a lot more access to things like the file system, the hardware on the machine that you're on, that kind of thing, registry, well, if you're on Windows, but if you're not, basically the file system in Linux. And when you move into the web world, you can access some of those. In fact, you can access all of those, but the effort to access all of those is considerable. And also that introduces lots of security considerations in terms of being able to access and deploy them, especially in highly secure environments, such as some corporate networks, etc. So you have to consider all of that, and then luckily, you have people like myself who can come in and give that advice, but not engaging them early enough. And this is why in the Scrum process, you should, when you're planning and putting your PBIs together, etc., you should always include your developers in that, because they have more context and understanding of the technical limitations and the technical capabilities of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So,
and that's usually why you see technical architects involved. But yeah, but Voltstrack has asked an interesting question.
Yes,
so
indeed.
I think we should answer this.
So what's worse, though? Clients that are too proactive in pushing changes, or clients that don't want to put time/money into maintaining? Oh, that is a good question. Josey, what do you think?
Clients that don't want to put the time or money into maintaining.
Do you think that's worse than people who are pushing changes on you because they are more, they have a little bit of knowledge, and they the
reason why I say that is every client that I have who the question what I was leading into with do you have clients that know just enough to be dangerous? I have the clients who like to be bleeding edge, even though nothing that they do is bleeding edge. And those particular clients are the ones who are like, yeah, so when are we on PHP 8? And I'm like, why do you need it? But they're able to have that engaged conversation with me. We're able to discuss the process. I have not met one that has full on forced me to do something. I will walk away from a job like that.
That's the beauty of our world, though, Josey, as self-employed.
I know that is very much the
beauty
of our world. But having a client that doesn't want to put any time or anything into maintenance, I cannot have them as a client. It's stipulated in my contracts. We must perform security maintenance, and it must be covered under contract time. It has to, because just because I have you sitting on your own little server somewhere does not mean that you are not going to impact anyone. I have had a server where the client didn't want to keep things maintained, where I got a phone call in the middle of the night from a university going, why is this server communicating and sending us spam? I don't play that game. I don't do that. That server ended up compromised because they were very hesitant. And that was the last time where I was like, fine, we'll follow your cycle. No, you came to me because I have an expertise. Either trust my expertise in this, or we can't work together. It's not simple.
Absolutely. And then again, it's our prerogative to be able to do that and be able to push clients away or advise them one way or another and explain to them why it's important. And that's a key thing in our job, is to be able to actually explain to them that these are my values. I've said multiple times, I value quality. You value security very, very highly, and we know that. I value the quality of the code that I write, in terms of the design decisions that I make aren't just for now. And I know there's such a thing as Yagni, you aren't going to need it. And a lot of clients, sometimes, they don't say it out loud, but they sometimes worry that I'm over engineering or over architecting things. Whereas a lot of the time I'm like, this is not much effort. It's not much overhead. Yes, there might be some effort and overhead for you to understand it, but in terms of the actual implementation of it, it's not hard to do this. And it gives us loads of benefit, not just now, but also in the future.
That's the thing. There's a perception. Yeah, but see, there's a perception in maintenance. Like, hearing me say that I am running hourly checks on certain things, and I have a constant check that I do every single day on every single one of my clients' sites, the ones that I host and the ones that I don't, along with the other stuff that I do, because I do more than web hosting. Yay. But anyway, I check on them. It may seem like it must take me forever. It doesn't, because I have tests set up to run certain things, to check for certain things. I have a very simplified process that is automated. Do I need to keep that automated process maintained? Heck yeah. Holy cow, yeah. And can that be a nightmare? At times, absolutely. But it is a risk I've undertaken, because how important, like you say, security is to me. I worry that There are too many people who are being led astray in the world of development. They may think that something is very simple. Oh, just change this one thing. It should be easy. It's just a line of code. And yet the ramifications of that one line of code, I have seen it fail so horribly because of an introduction of a 0-day bug. Like, there is a perception of what the weight or the actual value of time that you would lose for a maintenance thing. Like you said, discovered in a spike. You know, if you're unsure of how long it would take to do an upgrade, if you're unsure of what it would take for a certain maintenance thing,
test it.
Then do a spike. Test it. And the only thing I don't want to deal with is somebody who sits there and swears that they are right, that just changing this one thing, it's just one thing, it's not going to have a dramatic impact. It brings nightmares to my eyes.
Well, in that instance, then for me, I say absolutely go ahead with it, you know, because I'm in a different situation for you again. But we never work on production systems either. It's more, there's always development systems and integration systems and test systems and QA departments usually as well to do testing on things.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but sometimes that, you know, most of the time that exists in my world. But I never offload my testing. I take full responsibility for things that I've done and things that I deliver. But I've developed a way to over the years to develop software that it has a minimum amount of bugs because of the way that I design and architect my classes and the way that I design my code. And the way that I write my code as well with test-driven development. It's not foolproof. We always have bugs and difficult things to find, but I don't have to troubleshoot and debug my own code, very often, because when I deliver it and design it, I have almost 100% confidence that it is written in a way that is fit for purpose and catches most use cases. And I'm not much slower than somebody who doesn't do that, you know, because again, I've developed this way of working, and there's a lot of developers who do that as well. I'm not unique in that sense. But just changing something, especially in a production system, I've done it before. I remember one of my first whatever they are, one of my first mistakes when in a production system when I was a junior was I had a SQL Server stored procedure. It was a very small procedure, and it was running live in a TCP socket on a customer's site. The code, I mean, it was a big application, but there was this one store procedure, and it was a tiny little store procedure that did one little thing, like select from a table or something, yeah? Mm-hmm. And I dropped and recreated the stored procedure. And I didn't, and because all it was a tiny change. The change didn't actually affect anything, but because I dropped and recreated the stored procedure, at the time, that stored procedure, the reference to it was stored in memory in the socket. It was because of the way, it was VB6, and it was because of the way that the application domain kind of loaded it in. And now I look back at it, I kind of understand what it was, but I probably couldn't replicate it. But anyway, I dropped and recreated the stored procedure. Like 500 people that were working in a warehouse suddenly stopped working because this one stored procedure, which was fundamental to the operation of the system, was dropped and recreated. But if I'd altered it, instead of dropped and recreated it, it would have been fine. But I didn't know that at the time. And these days, you'd never catch me doing that because there's no chance in hell that I would ever put a live fix on a server. Ever.
I've had to do production changes and modifications before, and I don't like them. They scare me. It makes me sad face.
If something's broken, and I mean something is fundamentally, you know, absolutely knackered on a production server, then yes, I'll go on and I'll live troubleshoot it. But at that point, no one's working anyway. People are...
that's a P1.
Whatever you call it. But generally, I wouldn't get involved in that kind of thing. You know, before even I get involved in that kind of thing, it would be somebody who would restart the server and get everyone in the system to log off and log on again. You know, do the standard, basic kind of fundamental things. But I would hope that any software that I write or any component of software that I write would never get into that stage where it's fundamentally broken and breaking people in a live environment. again, because of the techniques that I have to write software. It's not, I just don't see it ever happening. I struggle to see that happening. Although, as I said, we're only human. Omnipotent humans may be, but we're only human.
Well, none of us can equal your majesty. Your radiance and your majesty, Chris. I mean, that's just a very simple thing. But yeah.
So
yeah, go ahead.
We've talked about the ideal world, but there's also the nightmare world, which are you have a, not you, you're not a nightmare world, but you said that you had a log monitoring tool of some description that monitors your packages and your websites and things like that. We have something similar for the DNI website because it's hosted in GitHub on live called Dependabot, which a lot of people who use GitHub may or may not know about.
Be familiar with.
Dependabot's wonderful because it's a little AI system and it just detects whether your package is in your package.json or your NuGet.config file, or if you're on old school .NET Framework or your CS proj files or whatever. It detects if they're out of date and they need updating, but it's focused around security updates by default. You know, if there's, as you said, a zero-day bug or there's a fundamental flaw that needs to be updated. I have a problem in that, although it's nice to know these things, most of the emails that come in from GitHub, from Dependabot, I just ignore them. I mean, they're there. They come into my inbox and I look at them and I go, great, yeah, I'm not going to get around to that.
Well, see, that's something that I actually call white noise. It's when you have alerts of any kind that become white noise to you, there's a problem. There's either got to be a change in the way you're getting reporting or what you're reporting on. So you should be able to potentially sit there and go, stop telling me about this. I know. Or, only inform me if I've, done a recent pull request or like what have you.
Only
like,
inform me if you know that I've got 5 minutes free, but I haven't,
Yes, only inform me. I mean, after all, we all know that, GitHub, run by the great Microsoft, who obviously is now trying to dominate every landscape out there, knows exactly what you're doing and eating for breakfast. They'll know exactly when you have time to deal with these particular issues. It's...
Garmin do.
When you get
tell you that much.
Ooh, fancy.
I've had that for a while.
Totally off topic. And for those of you who don't know, he just lifted his watch up to show you how fancy his watch is. But when you get a white noise like that, that's when you start ignoring. It's when it's like you can glance over it and you might be expecting to see a certain set of lines because you've seen it the same every single week or even every single day. You can miss something. The
thing with the Dependabot stuff, it's not that I'm missing it, it's that I know that it needs to be done, but I haven't got time to update it.
Yeah.
And I know that the security flaws are important, but I haven't...
We should be able to click remind me 12 weeks from now. I mean, it's like...
But in 12 weeks, my site might have been hacked, my server might have been taken over. So what do we do then? Now, if it's commercial, it's different.
Well, no. See, that's the thing. In that case, you have taken on and accepted the risk of not taking the time to update it. Because technically speaking, you can make the time to do the update. You may not like it. You may be really pissed off with the fact that you're not going to be able to finish that mission in 2077 or play that new PlayStation 5 game, but you can make time for it. You going and reading and going, yeah, I don't have time for it, I'll get to it. You have made a choice to accept the risk of not doing it. So if you are getting those alerts and you choose, remind me again 12 weeks from now kind of a dealio by just ignoring and not actually doing anything, that is an acceptance of risk. It is something that I think ends up being neglected in a process for development. You have to literally write out what the risk is for doing or not doing a particular task. That's one of the fundamentals of security. But,
Thank you for putting me in my place, Mama Josey. I needed to be told.
Not you too. I have an entire group of people who call me Mum now, and now I'm adding you to it. Oh, hello, children. I know you're watching silently.
It's one of those things that, yes, it's a guilty. There's a tiny little bit of guilt there, but I'm also, as you said, willing to accept the risk at the moment because of the amount of people. It's a bespoke website for one. It's not WordPress. So the likelihood that somebody will attack our website is just as likely as it's a lot less likely than somebody would attack a WordPress website. I'm not saying it's impossible, and if you're listening and you're malicious, please don't. But it's one of those things.
Come on. You've got a whole bunch of different type of factors that you have to worry about. Script kiddies are going to be the ones going after the WordPress site because prefab code, okay, go. But if you've got like a nation state coming after DNI stream, we might as well just say, hey, you want our 2FA to go with it.
There's also the argument as well that our website, the bugs on our website, the security fixes to the packages that we're using on our website are more likely than not. Now, if I would be able to make this decision quickly, if I actually looked through the list, more likely than not going to be part of the dev tools, which are used in the build process, but not actually used and deployed on the website. Yep. There might be some things in the website, like, for example, Lodash being used underneath Angular or something like that. And there's sometimes we don't actually have control over it because it's the package. If we're using Angular, and Angular inherits from Lodash, and they don't update their Lodash package, I'd like to think that they're more on the ball than I am, because they are a corporation. It's Google. It's people who have time to maintain their software. But that still means I have to update Angular, which I haven't done, because every time I do, it's a 3 fucking day job to do it, if not longer. Excuse the language, sorry.
But see, it gets crazy, and we're going to start going into even more topics about things. I just want to add that Tepe has said security. That's like using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a password instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. And that just gave me a quite little chuckle.
Yes.
So, yes, there is more that we could discuss upon this topic, but I think the reality is, if you are in development, plan for the maintenance.
Well, make sure your company plans for the maintenance. If you
that's a fair enough way to say it, because there should be someone who is responsible for understanding what there is that needs to be done.
Security and patches.
I look at it from my perspective. I do everything.
The thing is with me is that, yes, I do everything, and I do consider everything, and I do design secure first, and I do design with the latest patches and the latest frameworks, and I'm not scared of upgrading. The problem is, a lot of the time I have to be pragmatic, and I have to weigh up the security risks versus most of the time. The applications I use are either being run on a server which is locked down to hell, and it's not even external. It's a process that runs. It's a Windows service or a daemon that runs in the background, or it's a logon on an intranet that only people who use the line of business software that I've written are using, and the likelihood that they're going to want to try and attack it is extremely low, very, very low. That doesn't mean that people won't get into the network and try and attack it, but they've got to do a lot to get to that point, And usually it's not our concern that they're outside, that they're in the network. It's somebody else's concern, as in the client of the client. But it depends, a lot of the time it's very different. But yeah, so there's a lot of different.
Yeah, we can go into this forever.
We can. Anyway. So, shall we finish up?
Do you have any final statement you want to make?
No, that was kind of it. That was kind of it. That Josey and I look at things differently. You look at things because you work primarily in the public domain in terms of delivering your software as a website or as a web application that can be logged onto by your clients who are somewhere else in the world, and you need to host that, and that's on your hardware, which you are responsible for. So you have to be very, very careful about those patches and why your maintenance cycle is much more rapid and much more live and security focused than mine would be. Whereas mine is about making decisions and being pragmatic about actually being able to deliver a piece of software to a client that's fit for purpose and isn't too out of date.
Absolutely. But this is the beauty of the IT world, is we have these variations.
Yes.
So we reached the end of this particular show. We're going to move into our BYOM, which is our Bring Your Own Manual. This is sort of our response to our TFM. This is our chance to share some knowledge that we have learned. It's been a little while, Chris. What have you learned that you feel the class might participate and enjoy?
I learned something. I was doing some mentoring today, and I learned something from my mentee, who he doesn't have the greatest amount of confidence. He doesn't. He looks at me with awe quite a lot of the time because I'm experienced, and he isn't. He's very junior, and I keep trying to explain to him and tell him that I learn from him as well. I learn how to explain things to him. I learn quite a lot when he asks me a question I don't know something about. I go off and look it up, and I learn something new, and it's because of him that I've learned this something new. And I don't think he quite appreciates that it's a two-way relationship. I think you sometimes need to, as a mentee, you need to take a step back and go. I think I actually saw. Have you heard of a guy called Simon Sinek? You must have heard of him. He's quite popular in the talk world. He does a lot of motivational talks and. That kind of thing. Anyway, I quite like listening to him. He's very kind of blue sky thinking stuff, but I like the way he talks and I like the way he comes. He said something very similar the other day, that he was being mentored by somebody, and his mentor said to him, "I'm glad that you're my mentor." And he's like, "What?" It's like, you're my mentor. What? And he said, "Well, I consider you my mentor. We talk to each other and we chat, and I learn a lot off you." And he's like, "Well, I didn't realize all these years that this guy I've known him for 20 years, and he's always got time for me on the phone. I didn't realize he was getting something from it as well." But it is a two-way relationship. Anyway, that isn't my my BYOM is something that my mentee noticed when I was describing something to them. So we're talking about CSS styles today. We were doing some work, we were doing some paired programming together, and I said to him, "Oh, that is the short." We were talking about the border CSS style. Was it border or was it margin and padding? So margin dash top and margin dash bottom, margin dash left, margin dash right. Right, they're the longhand properties for setting the size of a margin on an element on a page. And I said, "Oh, there's a shorthand property which is just margin : and then you put in 0000 and
0040.
Yeah, whatever you want for it. Yeah. That's what that's the shorthand for it. But you can also do it with 2-part and 3-part, etc. But anyway, the 4-part, I explained it to him, and then I clicked on the dev tool that we're using and opened it up, and I showed him what the actual values were, and he immediately went, "Oh, it's clockwise," and I went, "What?" And it just never, ever I've always struggled to know how to apply that. I always have to look the documentation up, and it's top, right, bottom, left. Top, right, bottom, left, and that's the order that the 4-part thing goes.
The patterns and
I was just mind blown moment. I was like, my God, I've spent 20 years looking at this, and I always have to look it up. Now I'm not going to need to look it up again.
You will never forget again.
Never forget that again.
No. See, that's the thing. Little things like that are when you start going deeper into the code, so to speak, like when you're starting to look beyond what could be taught in like the entry levels of development or programming, because CSS is taught really early nowadays in anything that happens to be web-based. When you start getting further and further away, you forget little things like that. And having someone remind you is a fantastic thing.
I'm not even going to take that. I'm not even going to take that as a reminder. I didn't know that. I never, ever learned that. And he just, in 1 second, explained it to me. And I was like, my God, brilliant.
But my point is, though, is that kind of stuff is easy for some, hard for others. But at the same time, you have to know the patterns. And if you don't know how HTML tries to render itself, and you haven't had that taught to you, you wouldn't catch on to the whole sort of weird cycle thing that they've got going, because it matches across a lot of different frames. But anyway,
I said I'm constantly explaining.
Like your mentee. Actually, no, your mentor is awesome.
Yes, exactly. And I'm constantly explaining things to him and going through in detail as to, again, we were talking about how HTML renders and why the inner elements need to be considered before the outer elements in certain instances. It wasn't actually HTML for that. It was actually creating components within a view that the inner elements need to be rendered and created before the outer elements can know what to render internally. So that's to do with the life cycle of the page. And yeah, I'm explaining all this stuff to him constantly, but just this one little tidbit of information, it's just one of them things that the penny drops and you're like, my lord, that's brilliant. That's going in my BYOM today.
That's a really good one. For me, it's pretty much the simple frustration of having to pick CDNs. I have spent so much time looking at CDNs, and it is fascinating to me how alike and yet how different they all are. Like CloudFront or, oh my gosh, the names are going to pass right by my head. Not droplets, buckets. Oh, good God.
Every cloud system has a CDN of some description. So Azure Blob Storage, AWS S3, I think, is a CDN. I can't remember. There's a sub-name or subgenre of AWS is one.
Yeah, CloudFront it's a great thing. Yay. But no, the reason why our show is what it is we tend to try to pick topics about whatever it is that we're going through that week. This week is all about upgrading and adding new features, etc., but doing it in a way that can be literally maintained, because I'm having to hunt down CDNs. And I'm so tired of them. They're whole half a dozen, 6 out of 12. How do you pick, Chris?
I write my own. That's what I do. Honestly, I have written my own CDN system before, and obviously the software that connects to it or chooses the CDN. It's probably back before CDNs were as widespread as they are, though, and it was more, and again, an internal thing that chose different servers depending on where geologically the user was. So I've written systems for people who, yeah.
In my case, it's about geo hosting and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's almost like I'm making my own version of YouTube. Oh dear God! But anyway, it's one is there. Put my teeth back in. You can tell I'm getting tired. It's been a long week, Chris.
It's been a hard day for me today. I've had a lot of queries, and unfortunately, I had an accident outside my house earlier on today with our window cleaner decided, very, very icy, and his ladder went from under him. And
is he okay?
He was bleeding quite a lot, and I offered to take him to the hospital and everything, but he wouldn't have it. And I think I think his pride was hurt a little bit, but I think he's okay. I hope he's okay anyway. So much love going out to Phil, our window cleaner.
If you're listening, Phil,
it won't be. I can guarantee that.
But we've reached the end of our show. A massive thank you to everybody in Twitch chat who has been chatting away and asking questions, and for joining in. And for all of you listening in the future or watching us in the future, thank you so much for participating.
You can visit our website on www.dnistream.live for links to all our social media channels, Discord, Dev Chat, and podcast discovery platforms. You can also use it to contact us for any reason. If you've got any feedback, you've got any questions, you've got any topic suggestions, you've got a funny dev story, or you want to be a guest on the show, please do get in touch. Lastly, do not forget to follow our Twitch channel, which if you're watching on now, or if you're not watching on now, is twitch.tv/DNI stream.
Yes. And we hope to see you all next week here, Thursday, 7 p.m. GMT time on twitch.tv/DNI stream. All that's left to say is bye-bye to Chris's epic beard. It has grown, my friend.
Is it a gruff voice? Does my beard have a gruff voice? Goodbye.
Your beard's...
He said goodbye to my beard. It's got to talk back to you.
Oh, wow. I have entered the Matrix, my friends. Anyway, it's goodbye from Chris.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye from me. And we'll see you all next week, and hopefully in Discord. Bye.
Bye.